Hello, everyone. We have our speakers here.
Hey, hey.
Hey, Darren. I just invited Caesar as a speaker. Everyone's on time. That's great. Hi. Thanks for joining.
No worries. Always keen to learn some new stuff.
Oh, yeah. Darren has all the alpha. So, um, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting, as usual. So, let's wait a few more minutes for more people to join, and then we can start. And just by the way, I'm recording this, as you may already be aware of. Well, actually, Twitter is recording it, and after that, I'll try to extract it and I'll put it on. I'll put it on YouTube on IPOR's YouTube channel. So it's gonna be available forever. Well, as long as YouTube exists, I guess. Yeah. Cool. So it's 8:30. So yeah, I think more people will be joining while this is happening. So I guess yeah, it's a good place to start. And actually, this voice that you've been hearing coming from IPOR Labs account is actually Vlad, the marketing guy at IPOR. That's me. So yeah, welcome everyone, and I guess we can start with some introductions. Yeah, maybe Darren, you can start. Oh, I see Łukasz here and Dimitar as well. Great. Um, so yeah, Darren, if you want, sir, you can start with a little introduction to yourself and yeah, whatever you feel like is relevant. We have so much going on, but yeah, let's try to be as focused as possible.
Yeah, we're maybe not the best team at being succinct in our messaging and our talks and our rants, but you know, everyone has a different flavor. So my name's Darren. I'm the co-founder of IPOR Labs. I've been building in crypto for now, this is coming up on a dozen years. So I have a very long-term view to the market and really excited about IPOR because we take this very long-term view again to the market and this kind of the base layer of fixed income. You know, is this really one, the data layer and the index, and two, the derivatives layer that's the stabilizing factor under the credit markets. And I actually had to ask the intern, who is it, Ceazor? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Ceazor. Yeah, Ceazor. That's it.
Okay, okay, like a Caesar and a czar, or
No. Just Ceazor. That's it. You just Ceazor.
okay,
Like
okay.
kind of like the Caesar of like Rome, sort
Yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, cool. So I'd love to hear more about you, actually.
Okay. Yes, I'm Caesar. Basically, I am a degenerate DeFi user. I create educational content and just share it with everybody. I would say I'm at the point now where I'm pretty well versed in most things DeFi. I've done I don't know, something like 300, 400 videos on various different project protocols. So I've read more than 300, 400 different full documentations on all different kinds of DeFi protocols. I don't really get into NFTs too much unless they kind of have to do with DeFi itself, like utility or like a Uniswap version 3 position is an NFT, but it's DeFi still, right? It's not PFPs and speculation and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I do. And I do things like this where I just talk to people, I give just my opinions on things, and that's it. That's pretty much who I am.
Okay, 300-400 videos. That's quite a body of work. So, like, what are some of your favorites? Some of your favorite DeFi protocols?
Well, I'm pretty fickle, so I wouldn't say I have favorites.
Okay.
I found that in DeFi so far, being agile is quite useful because one, I have avoided quite a few exploits by just being plugged in all the time, right? And then just exploits, and then I also find that being agile allows me to get the best gains because I can get into projects that are early and I understand them before most other people because I'm able to quickly read the docs and understand the idea. And then also, I can get into the smart contracts a little bit and read as well. Like most people can't read Solidity, right? So I'm able to do that. So I think agility is my main thing, but what I really do like is, of course, leverage protocols that offer the ability for users to leverage, or for me or other people to lend to leverage users without risk of like with over collateralized leveraging or just it's not really over collateralized, but a project that I really like off the top of my head would probably be I like Gearbox because it's again leveraged up, but it's isolated, so they control the risk. They don't let people do really silly things with the borrowed assets. So I kind of like that. I can go on and on. Like, yeah, there's a lot of projects that I have on my radar that I'm kind of in. Pretty much everything that I've ever done a video on, I I kind of keep tabs on them a little bit, but 300 to 400 projects is pretty hard to read all the announcements and find out what's going on with all of them, right?
Yeah, it's quite crazy to keep up with the speed of the DeFi world, or crypto in general, across different L1s. You mentioned NFTs. It's pretty impossible. And I have my head down building IPOR, and I miss out on a lot of what's happening in the rest of the industry, and that's kind of a bummer. Sometimes I have a lot of jealousy towards people that work at funds, because they get to see kind of the whole spectrum. You kind of see what's the whole thing that's happening. So when you're head down in a project, you kind of miss out on that. But it seems like from your body of work that you get to get really involved in that, and that's pretty cool. So yeah. So you mentioned leverage, so like Gearbox, for example, from what I understand, you have this kind of this one construct that you can't go outside. You can use this leverage inside, but the deposits cannot exit. So that way you cover the default risk, right? And some things like this, I think the idea of leverage is interesting, but when you provide leverage, it's always risk management that's key, right? And that's, I think, what we're seeing after the washout from, well, actually not really much of the DeFi blew up. It was most of the CeFi that blew up on leverage. But, of course, leverage and risk management go hand in hand.
Well, I think the major issue with leveraging is that people don't consider the retraction of that leverage, right? And that's why, that's why I'm saying like Gearbox specifically is interesting because they take care of that. They have the system in place that will retract those things. Like I've seen people borrow like tens of millions of dollars versus assets, right? So versus like a blue chip, borrow tens of millions of dollars, take that tens of $1 million, buy some, speculative shitcoin and lock it for 4 years. Like that's just insane, right? Like you shouldn't be doing that, right? Like if you want to lock tokens, it's fine. You can lock tokens, but don't use borrowed money
4 year
to
lock,
buy
not to
tokens and
mention
lock them for 4 years.
4
Because
years, not to mention
the
any
collateral value goes
particular.
down and you get
Yeah.
liquidated, right? So things like this, I think there's what people just need to understand is that like you need to have a plan of like how are you going to repay the debt if your collateral goes down. Otherwise, you're selling the bottom, right? So I think this is just an idea, like a logical problem that a lot of like degenerate people use. I think they think of DeFi or crypto as just a play game, and if they lose it all, they don't really care. Like, oh, it's all just like a video game, right? I gotta just start over. But it's not the case. It's real money, and people are really in tough places because of this real money, and so forth.
Well, I mean, also if you take that view to markets, then it's you're happy going up, and everyone shakes their head saying, "What does anyone know what's going on when it's going down?" Right? So, yeah, I think in some ways we kind of get what
I'm
we
getting a lot
deserve.
of garble from you, so I can't really hear your questions and stuff. It's like robotic, kicking out, kicking in.
Okay, so I just unplugged the headphones, so maybe this will be better. Is it better now?
Oh yeah. It's much better now.
Okay, great. So actually, the birth of the IPOR protocol was coming from a lot of this like DeFi summer YOLO, leverage everything to. I mean,
Actually, no, it's not better. Does anybody else have this
No,
problem?
actually, I can hear him act like very well. It's perfect almost on my side.
Okay, let me try to move to a different location, and maybe it's my connection.
I also can hear you very well.
But I can hear you. It's crisp and clean.
Huh, that's weird. I'm on my headphones, so I hear you both perfectly. I don't know.
yeah, is it any better now?
Yeah, I heard that clearly.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I was mentioning about like the birth of IPOR was actually in this DeFi summer where every asset is going up, which means people take debt against the rising assets because they don't care about 20% per annum when they're looking for 20% per day, right? And this is probably an outstanding market experience, and it probably won't last. And of course, people were looking more towards speculation, not really worrying about the liquidations because the collateral asset is rising. But if you take that view to the market when it's collapsing, then that's when you have the mass liquidations. So, easy up, easy down.
Yeah, exactly. And the other problem with this is that like some of these players, they have adverse, like it has a large effect on the ecosystem itself. Like if you have $80 million worth of collateral and it needs to get liquidated, that can create some serious problems for the ecosystem itself. So limiting this kind of behavior might be something that protocols need to consider, like and so forth. So that's just basically the kind of reasoning that I have for in like liking a project like Gearbox or I think there's another one called Archimedes. They have this controlled leverage where you can't just leverage shamelessly on anything you want, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's see where the most volume is happening. Is actually is on the perps, right? Because people like leverage, they like speculation. So these are a bit at odds with one another, right? What the people want, and then like the risk management on the market. But you mentioned something like a $80 million position. Actually, we had a very interesting behavior 2 weeks ago, I believe, in the USDT markets, where we had a single attacker that went YOLO long on the USDT rates and then proceeded to raise the utilization rate. And did some kind of looped borrowing attacks to raise the utilization rate on Avian Compound. And that pushed us really to basically write and rewrite a risk engine. And so that's one of the things that's in process right now on the IPOR protocol. But yeah, I mean, risk management and dynamic risk management is really hard in DeFi because you have to code things, making certain assumptions, and you have limited ways that you can basically manage risk on the protocol once it's live. So it's a really complex problem to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like people, like the bad actors inside crypto are, it's like a virus, right, in your body, which is kind of necessary. Like you get a sick, you become stronger, right? Your body learns. Same thing is happening in crypto. You have these hackers, which are anonymous. They feel like you can't sue them, you can't find them, you can't send the police after them, and they're attacking protocols at any as much as they can, right? And by that, you need to not only you need to have like the agility again to actually be able to react to these attacks, or when an attack is placed on another protocol and then that vulnerability is brought to light, then all the other protocols need to be aware of that and then perhaps transition or change their project to, or the protocol to protect against that. But then you have the alternative of like, if you put your project all behind proxies and make it all upgradable contracts, then you have trust. Then you have the antithesis of crypto, where people need to trust that your team is not going to suddenly change some route of the flow of tokens and basically steal everything, right? So it's a juggling game, like you said. And then the fact, like if you're spending, let's say 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours a day coding your idea, how are you keeping up with, new innovation as well as new innovations of like exploits and so forth? So it's a very hard job, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have to have kind of a well-rounded, at least well-rounded talent building the protocols, right? So we have some information funnel in DeFi, on the economic exploits, on the smart contract exploits, on what's happening in the communities. And now we're building out, what are the basically the funnels for not only code upgrades but also governance proposals for the credit markets. Because the IPOR index has to tap into those credit markets and the smart contracts to read essentially the interest rate. So building these flows is complex, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to do it right. Yeah, I agree. Like you said, you have to actually be very well rounded across kind of every aspect.
Maybe you can speak more on the what you guys are building, because last thing I heard was that you guys were doing something that was about power tokens, like an alternative to the VE locking, right?
Yeah, I would say, okay, so that part is really okay. So maybe I'll go back to my last comment about the very kind of well-rounded team. So the IPOR protocol itself is actually interest rates and interest rate derivative protocol. And power tokens is a DeFi primitive that was invented by Mr. Dimitar Dinev, who's the listener, my co-founder, and it's very specifically about governance. It's about creating a modular architecture for token governance, and actually, especially around the liquidity mining incentives. So maybe really quickly, I'll first go over IPOR protocol. So we actually borrow some of the fundamentals from the largest markets in traditional finance. Those are the interest rate derivatives. We're talking anywhere from 450 trillion to 600 trillion notional value per year. And it's one of the largest financial markets in the world, and it's the one that no one knows about. But it's behind, for example, every anytime that you take a mortgage from the bank to buy a house, these instruments are underpinning these basically these debt deals, right? And the other part of it is how those are based, right? So typically they're based on a benchmark rate. For a long time, that really gold standard had been the LIBOR, which is the London Interbank Offered Rate. It's done by a survey of banks. You ask, a subset of banks, how much would you charge for interest across these currencies at different tenors? They source it, they throw out the top volume, the top value, the bottom value, they volume weight it, and they publish it. And then that becomes the most important number because that's what they're going to base all of these credit instruments on. The instruments, the deals, the derivatives. The problem was actually that, doing this kind of survey-based approach, you have people inside banks that maybe get a little greedy. They'll over or under report the rate. They will take the opposite side of the position and they'll profit, and they'll put those profits in their pocket. And that was actually happening probably for around 20 years, if not more. And it really took a long time to wind down the LIBOR because so many long-dated instruments were pegged to it, and that's really been taken over by the SOFR, which is the repo rate, the overnight financing rate. But that one number, it used to be called the most important number in finance. And if we look at DeFi, we actually have a much better construction. So why I mentioned we're looking at Aave and Compound and other upcoming money markets is you can actually read from the smart contracts what the interest rate is. And that's really cool. And then, in the case of the attack, someone can actually flush those up or flush those down, but they do it through a market action. So it's not that you can over or under report. You actually have to take an action, which is maybe a valid market action to do so. So we replace this survey of bankers, which is trust-based, with a survey, smart contract to smart contract, which is transparent, it's auditable, it's open source. And then on the other side, if you look at that interest rate going up and having compound when you're, borrowing or lending, if you're a lender and the rate spikes from 2% to 30%, you're happy because you're getting more money, right? But of course, if you're the borrower, you're on the opposite side because your repayment obligation is much higher. So the interest rate derivatives, they allow you to go long or short versus the rates. And this basically allows you, if you're the lender, you want to cover your downside rate exposure, which is basically the fixed income case. And if you're the borrower, you want to go long against the rates because you want to cover that repayment obligation. And so there's an IPOR DEX with interest rate swaps. And you can essentially go long or short. So long, it would be pay fixed, and short would be receive fixed. And the protocol is done over 3 billion in notional volume in swaps. It's got about 40 million TVL, and it has an ongoing trading competition. So there's the little plug here, with over 40,000 IPOR, which is over 200K, I think, in dollar terms, available for prizes. Just entered the week 3. There's four phases. But yeah, I mean that's a basic overview of the protocol. So before we get into the power tokens, I don't know if you have any questions about that.
Yeah. I'd like to just solidify my understanding here. So in traditional finance, the interest rates are they what's the word I'm looking for? Synchronized. Like say all the banks, they kind of they say, oh, I'll lend for 3%. I'll lend for 5%, and then some average is taken, and then that is given to everyone. Adopts that based on this, like the London poor or something. Or are we talking?
Yeah, exactly that. So in the LIBOR case, there was a subset of 18 banks, or depending on what currency you're reporting for, these specific banks are allowed to report for this currency. Right. So basically you ask the bank what they would loan, for these different tenors, and then they volume weight it, and then they essentially print that in public.
Okay.
Right?
So, and then they will actually use that interest rate to lend?
Yeah. So most people don't know, but their mortgage to buy a house is probably quoted on some benchmark rate plus some percentage. So
okay.
This is kind of this underpinning infrastructure to the debt markets that the average person doesn't know about, but they've probably touched in many aspects of their life.
Oh, totally, right? So, but then in DeFi, we have utilization curves, right? So
Yep.
we have algorithmically designed interest rates. based on utilization. So if you pull like the interest rate from many different projects, you will see large variance in this interest rate because of TVL and utilization, right?
Yep.
So of course it will get arbed by people who are sophisticated and want just or want to arb it, right? So there's it'll level out and kind of create an average for the most cases, right? Depending on except for the outlining new protocols.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so then when you guys come along, and then I assume that you are based on a traditional finance system where people want to hedge their borrow or hedge their lending rate, right? Because if there's a sudden spike in lending or borrowing, you might lose money in the long run, right? So people want to hedge this. And I can see this happening a lot in DeFi. Like if you're on Aave and then somebody comes along and withdraws, $10 million or borrows $10 million, your interest rate can change quite drastically, right? Like once it hits that 80%, it can be very drastic, right?
Exactly.
But I don't see this as an issue per se in TradFi because if all the banks are kind of like, oh, let's talk together, 6%, yes, 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 no, yes, 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 and then they all just lend at 6% plus their like premiums.
Yeah.
I
So
wouldn't
actually,
think that people would need to hedge.
it's not being ported from TradFi. It's actually going into the DeFi protocol. So the current IPOR construction is just Aave v2 and Compound v2. And the reason is because of a volume weighting. But right now, maybe V3 for both could be interesting. Maybe you have some dynamic, like Euler or Morpho or some of these other up and coming protocols. And the cool side on the DeFi side is how do they get included or removed by decentralized governance? So the IPOR DAO is actually fighting for the sanctity of this very important interest rate. And as you mentioned, you consider the IPOR like a barometer, a thermometer. It doesn't set the rates; it reads the temperature of the room. It's the state of the credit markets because it's reading from the state of the credit markets, and everything should converge to the IPOR because it is the IPOR. I mean, it's the state of the credit markets, and because of that, the outliers should be arbed away, and everything should converge.
Yeah, like long as smart contract risk is eliminated on like new protocols, like something new that comes along, it has a new design, that you have to consider that. But if it were like, let's say we had 7 like compound finance direct forks with exactly the same perimeters, then you would see those be arbed by just bots. They would just literally like there's a protocol around. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh, it's Fuji DAO. Fuji DAO does what they do is if you borrow or lend through Fuji DAO, if you open a borrowing position through Fuji DAO, they're going to move your debt back and forth between, I think, Compound and Aave or something. I can't remember the protocols, but that's the idea. So they're going to arb it for you. But
Yeah, I
if you
mean
guys,
but this is that's not arb. It's deploying yield to the highest. So that is really arbitraging it down to the IPOR. So this kind of market force is trying to kind of level this rate variance.
yeah. Like I guess arbitrage is the wrong word that I'm.
No, I mean
that
it
I'm not
is
trying to
it is
correct.
arbitrage. It is arbitrage. It's going it's playing on the highest deposit.
Oh yes, of
Let's
course,
say that.
and then increasing utilization of or whatever. Yeah, I get it. Like they're basically leveling everybody down to IPOR, basically those two protocols that are integrated with this. So like, but my point is that like there's already definitely bots doing that, and these guys are just trying to give this service to the user to increase the just make the user's experience better, right?
Well, you talked about efficiency, right? And you talked about leverage. So, for example, like doing that, you're actually having to deploy the capital, right? So you want to deploy, 10 million into the pool that's yielding the highest right now. Compound USDT goes to the roof, and you deploy USDT there, bring the utilization rate down, but you're earning the higher yield during this time, right?
So that's capital inefficient. If you assume that someone's going to do that, you can also short the rate, right? Because this arbitrage is going to be removed. So there's two different plays in this. There is the money market play, which is this kind of efficient depositor, to the highest rates. And then there's the interest rate derivative play, where you are taking a position on the direction of the rate. So both of these are viable plays. Both of these are normal, across CFI, TradFi. The depositing of the yields is very native to DeFi, but the interest rate derivative space hasn't really picked up, and that's the gap that the IPOR protocol is looking to fill.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, let me ask you some questions about this, the actual derivatives themselves.
Yeah.
With all perpetuals, there needs to be somebody on the other side willing to sell that to the speculators, right? So, does it use just a normal model? Like, if I stake USDC or whatever token you guys use, then people can take my USDC, gamble against the interest rate in whichever, however sophisticated they are. That's up to them, right? And then if they win, I lose, and if they lose, I win. Basically, is this the same model at IPOR?
Yeah, I would say it's really mostly the same model, except for a couple caveats. So one, it's not a perp; it's actually an interest rate swap. Interest rate swap means that two parties are exchanging cash flows over time, right? So depending on what the rate of, what direction the rate goes. Let's say you're long and I'm short, right? And we pick kind of this mid rate. When it goes in your direction, I'm paying you. If it goes in my direction, you're paying me. And over time, we'll net out the wins and the losses between the two positions. So it's not like, if the rate spikes up, that one of us is going to get liquidated. It's going to compare the difference between the two payoffs over a certain time. So it's I would say, much less speculative than a perp. And that's because it has kind of this efficient market function, to really hedge the debt positions. Of course, you can always employ different strategies. There are different arbitrage strategies. Our head of BD just released an article, for example, what are different strategies that you would use to play the volatile interest rates that are happening right now because of the regulatory shakeup in the US. You have different really volatile rates between USDC, USDT, and DAI. Okay, but sorry, getting back to what you were talking about, the construction, we take this really TradFi instrument and we adapt it to DeFi. We take the best of TradFi, we take the best of DeFi. So it's a peer-to-pool model. So you have siloed risk. So you mentioned, you're a depositor. Let's say you're a USDC depositor. You are essentially underwriting these derivatives. There's an AMM that's bespoke, and I'll get into that in a moment. And then you're actually, facilitating swaps, both long and short. So that construction is really, that's correct. There's a couple of nuances. So, for example, the deposits aren't just underwriting contracts, but they're actually going out to the money market to yield while these contracts are not being paid off. So, because you have this time element, actually the majority of the depositor assets are yielding from Aave, they're yielding from Compound. And so they're getting this kind of base money market yield. So that's like your base yield. And I think on average, it's about 5 to 7% per annum that they've been yielding because they've been getting this base money market yield. When the depositors, when the traders deposit, that's also going out to the money markets to yield. And so they're kind of getting a leveraged yield there because there's more stables going out to the market. And then they earn fees, what's called SOAP, or the sum of all payoffs, and you can just think of that as the winnings and the losings, from the contracts, and then the asset management. So there's another yield source, that's quite important for the depositors. That's not just from the market activity. And another thing that's really interesting and important about the index, and why would you want to be included in the index, is because actually these deposits go out into the market. So the deposits are going out into Aave, they're going out into Compound. So they're actually underpinning the very credit markets that the IPOR is being sourced from. So you can imagine that these up and coming money market protocols will want to be included in the index, because that also become a destination for the IPOR, the liquidity providers. So in the middle, you have this bespoke AMM, and so the bespoke AMM, it wouldn't be possible without our quant team. So we have our chief scientist, Mau Hernandez. He actually met him in Tokyo in 2017. So he's a PhD computer scientist. He set up the trading desk at SBI Bits. SBI is the large Japanese retail brokerage, securities broker. He's actually from Brazil. And he set up the trading desk there, and he brings two other guys that have over 20 years as quants in fixed income, and really the whole point of the AMM is that it's a bespoke AMM built specifically for interest rates, not just interest rates, but interest rates in DeFi. So it uses 3 different quant models, and the whole magic is, on the quant side, you can do any number of calculations on your own computer, regardless of complexity, regardless of electricity cost. But if you put that on chain, it's going to be ridiculously expensive to run. So what the real beauty is actually boiling that down into a piecewise linear function that adds a spread for the pay fixed and the receive fixed that approximates the fair value of these swaps. And so that I would say the big innovation is you take all these quant models that have existed, they're tried and true. You take the limitations that you have with computation for complexity and cost on chain, and you marry them together to get the best trade-off between risk management, complexity, and cost. And so that is really the engine behind the IPOR swaps.
Okay, I think I get it. I think I've got a pretty clear model inside my head. Like, there's a good. I would correct me if I'm wrong. There are 4 major players here. There are 2 different kinds of, like, we'll call them whales. 2 whales that are looking to hedge their borrow or lending interest rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a supplier who's basically trying to farm the trading fees of those 2 whales. And then we have the speculator who's trying to basically make some quick money off of, predicting where those interest rates might go with his own personalized, strategies, right? Is there something I'm missing there?
Arbitrager. You had it. You said 4. You gave 3, and I knew you had this in mind.
Okay, and then the arbitrager who's okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. I think one thing that you said to me that really stood out was that, like, these whales, the people who are buying the hedge, they generally are not hedging for 2 days, 3 days. It's generally a pretty long-term hedge, right? I would think there might be smaller players, but not whales. Whales don't tend to open positions and close them frequently, right? Because they're paying fees, and it can be quite substantial amount of money, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. And so, okay.
So let me finish. But then
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Since these whales are buying these positions or holding these positions, then the assets, it's pulling the assets out of Aave or Compound, creating opening those positions, and then any assets that are left over are sent back to Compound or Aave to continue to gain that yield and so forth. So this is what really stood out to me, is that, like, you don't have assets sitting in a liquidity pool. You have assets deployed to Aave and extracted when needed. And this is, I'd have to read the docs and kind of go through it to really get a clear picture in my mind. But when you said that, that really stuck out to me as, like, that's how we do capital efficiency, right? Like, that's how we make all this DeFi better than TradFi, is by not leaving assets sitting in a pool waiting for use. Put them to work, and when they need to be used, pull them out, put them to use, and then put them back as can, right? Is this correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's productive while it's productive, and maybe you'll really like this. I'll just give you a sneak peek. So maybe the next big product that you might be able to see. I can't give you a timeline, but we have it in design. Is even more capital efficiency on top of that for the liquidity providers. So I'll just drop that teaser there, and you can keep your eyes open. But yeah, exactly that. Everything should be productive while it's providing services, while it's earning fees, while it's giving a this kind of efficient efficient market function.
It's pretty interesting. You've got me interested for sure. My appetite's whetted for this.
That's great. I mean, it's also a really pleasure because it's a lot of very dense stuff, and you're breaking it down extremely quickly. So this is always really nice to have these types of conversations.
Yeah, the whole like the mathematics of it, that's beyond me. Like I'm a logical person. I understand logic, but I can't do anything beyond basic algebra for the most part.
I use my hands. We have the amazing mathematicians on IPOR Labs team. Actually, one is sitting in the audience right now. I won't oust them. But yeah, I mean, we have I think three PhDs on the team right now.
Well,
So
everyone has to use their strengths, right? Like that's the whole point of having a team, is to pull in people of different strengths and put them to build something that's great, right?
exactly. So,
Okay, well,
any more questions about like I guess the main functionality? Well, sorry, maybe one thing to add. You mentioned about kind of these long dated instruments. So currently we have what's a proof of concept, which is a 28-day or a 4-week interest rate swap, and it's cancelable. It has this optionality, so you can early exit, right? And so this is, we would say, it's very kind of a proof of concept. The leverage, it used to be up to 1,000x on that for the USD for across all. The leverage been cut to 100x for the USDT because it's volatility, and it's now currently sitting 500 on USDC and DAI. And again, it's not so degen. It's not going to get liquidated if you have this huge rate move. It's payoffs over time. But the next workflow is actually to extend the durations of these instruments. The reason we started with 1 month is because we didn't have 1 month, right? So we have to really build month by month. And so that means that you will be able to hedge your position for longer. It also requires different calculations to estimate the fair value of these swaps, a little different kind of market construction. And also we need to have a semblance of a yield curve, like what is this debt worth in the future? And we really don't know. We just have our finger in the air. So it'll be a little bit of these kind of longer dated fixed income instruments, and also these interest rate derivative instruments that go into construct the future yield.
yeah, future yield's pretty hard to predict, right? It's even worse than like implied volatility, right? Um, I, uh, I what I'm failing to have a clear picture in my mind right now, just because I'm pretty visual. I like to look at images and stuff, but so I don't have any image in front of me right now. So basically, if I'm let's say I'm a person who's looking to hedge his interest rate. Let's say I've lent, and I want to make sure that if that interest rate goes down, I'm still going to make some good money off of this, right? So how would I open up a position? Do I have to provide collateral, or do I just go to like a swap and swap USDC for an interest rate token? Like, yeah, like what is the flow for me?
Yeah, so you would let's say you're a lender on compound, right? So USDC lender on compound. Let's say you take a $10 million. You're lending 10 million. You want to cover your downside risk, so then you would just take the corresponding collateral up to the leverage. So you can choose your notional amount on the IPOR app. So you would choose receive fixed, pay floating, which is the short, and you would input 10. You would input 10 million on your notional value, and you select your leverage, right? So it's actually fairly simple, and again, really capital efficient. That's the whole reason that you have this high leverage, is for capital efficiency on the hedging.
Okay, so let's say I borrowed $10 million from some asset. Let's just make it simple. Let's say I have ETH, I borrowed $10 million, I have USDC, I put that in Aave, and then I want to make sure that my USDC yield exceeds that of my debt because I borrowed that USDC, right? So I want to make sure I make money out of this endeavor, right? So I'm going to hedge that if I lose, if that USDC lending rate goes down, I want to make sure I can pay back my debt plus the interest that I'm going to incur, right? So would I then need to have come up with another amount of money to open this hedged position? So like, it's
Yes,
10
yes. I
million,
mean, hedging is always a cost, right? So you're going to need to set aside whatever collateral you want to hedge, right? So if we talk about that 10 million figure, at 500x is 20K, or at 1000x it's 10K, right? And that would be the collateral to hedge the position.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then those positions, of course, could get liquidated if the interest rate were to go against the choice that I've made, like if it were to go up or if I,
Exactly.
yeah, okay.
Exactly. And if it
Hmm.
goes up, you make. I mean, the whole point is, if it goes up, you make more, but you lose on the derivative. If it goes down, you win on the derivative, right? These should more or less level out, minus the fees and and the spread.
Now, does the user experience make this something that like a layman's can do? Somebody who's like do I have to be able to mathematically understand, how much collateral I need, what is my position, if it goes up X amount, will I lose this much? Like do I have to
Yeah, I,
do all the math on a spreadsheet and then go and buy my
no, you don't. But first of all, also there's not. It's a kind of a proxy hedge. It's not a perfect hedge. So for a couple reasons. One, the index is it's a mid-market rate, so it's between the borrowing and the lending, and then it's taking the multiple protocols, right? So your protocol may not move in lockstep with the IPOR rate, right? And this is because one, the inefficiency of the markets right now. But if you wanted to perfectly hedge it, we could set up a IPOR index for each of these markets. But that's inefficient in terms of the markets because it diversifies. You have to basically split the liquidity between the different pools, underwriting multiple instruments, and that has its own downsides and potential trade-offs. On the IPOR app, there is a hedging calculator, so you can model out with just a couple of simple buttons, what would happen if it's going to go up or down, by the end of the swap, whether it would get liquidated or, what the rate of return on the swap would be. And, the next step is something called a DVO1 calculator, which is, what's the change in dollar value exposure at 1 basis point. And that's something that more sophisticated traders will use, and we'll probably turn that into something like an educational quest on Crew 3, because the IPO protocol is very much about education. For example, there's an entire tutorial about interest rate swaps on Crew 3 in Discord. But yeah, I mean, so you don't have to. One, you don't have to. There's simple tools. Two, that's not a perfect hedge. Three, we'll be building vaults that will have this kind of one-click fixed rate. So I guess, those are kind of three quick answers.
Yeah. One of the things you said that stood out in that little bit was the point that it's hard to perfectly hedge it because the IPOR rate is not the rate that I'm actually exposed to. It's an average of, it's pretty close because it's Aave and compound. It's not like all of these other, obscure lending markets, right? So it's gonna be close as long as I'm lending and borrowing on Aave. But I could lend and borrow anywhere and still use the IPOR rate as my hedge, right? Like,
Yeah. And actually, maybe one of the best protocols to actually do a near perfect hedge is Morpho, right? Morpho is this rate optimizer. I really like it. Really like the team, and its idea is this Pareto, improvement on rates, which I think you're probably very familiar with. But the thing about Morpho is actually it's creating this kind of mid-market rate. And it aligns very well with the IPOR rate. We did some simulations, and the basis risk, which is the difference between the movements of these two rates, is extremely low. So actually, maybe the easiest way is take a loan or borrow on Morpho and then take the IPOR swap.
like I said, like I look at so many things, but I Morpho in my brain is basically doing the same thing that I was talking about with Fuji, right? Like if you open a position on Morpho, it's going to move your debt around to basically optimize your debt, so you're paying the lowest amount of interest based on whichever is better at that time, Aave or compound, or maybe some others as well, right?
They have the Aave and they have both the Aave and compound strategies, but it basically rides on top, right? So you'll be getting at least the Aave or compound rate, but whatever they match you on, you get a better rate, right? So that means the lending rate would be higher for lenders, the borrowing rate would be lower for borrowers. So it is actually like trending them both to the middle. So this is why it aligns extremely well with the IPOR rate, because it may not be perfectly in the middle between the borrowing and lending rate that both parties are getting, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's coming back to me. I think I'm not sure if I did a video on Morpho or not, but I did definitely look at it.
I definitely recommend it. I think they're up like 300, 400 million TVL. It's quite cool, and it's an optimizer that rides on Aave and compound. This. So yeah.
Did you want to speak a little bit about the power tokens? Like,
Yeah, sure.
I did read the docs on these as well, and I did enjoy what I read there. But please refresh my memory.
Yeah, I'm gonna also invite Dimitar up because it's his creation. But let me see. Let me see if I can. Yeah, okay, I invited him up. In the meantime, okay, so Power Token, one, it's an architecture, right? The architecture is this staked token can be delegated to different strategies or different modules, right? So one of those modules can be the governance. One of those modules can be the liquidity mining, for example, right? And this is a huge advantage because you can create any module, and in that module, create something new that's specific for your protocol. So the modularity of the architecture is one really cool, right? So that means that even you can delegate your governance to someone else while you still get access to the leveraged staking yields and whatnot. And actually, Mr. Cat, you want to enlighten us about power tokens?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Caesar. Nice to meet you, mate.
You too, of course.
How is my sound, by the way? My internet has been not the best today.
Yeah,
it's
we can hear you.
Bulgarian.
All right. So power tokens. I heard actually that you have read about it and that you like the concept. So I mean, yeah, where Darren started, I guess like one of the most important things is basically the modular design of the power tokens. Yes, basically splitting the different parts of the token economy. Yes, like if we're talking about governance, if we're talking about dividends, if we're talking about, for example, boost on your APRs, all of this basically is in their own different modules. And it really allows the protocol to just like create new modules and swap modules, like change them without really affecting the rest of the protocol. So for majority of the protocols that are launching, this probably is a feature that is very highly valuable because it is extremely difficult. For example, if you want to innovate on governance and then you want to also innovate on token distribution, and then you also want to do something with like, let's say, a dividend scheme or incentives for proposals, yes, or incentives for governance, it's very hard if all of those things are linked to the same construct, yes, because then you really cannot touch it that much. You cannot modify it to really fit like your preferences and your objectives. So that modularity is the first thing, but I guess majority of the people actually are more interested about like the actual like token distribution and the multiplier. So I mean, you said that you read it, so maybe you can just ask me some questions because I guess we don't have the time to go through the whole thing.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like I don't have too much time either, but yeah, like basically like what I want to like I said, I read so many things that they go into the brain, and then the only way I can remember them is to go back and watch my videos, right? And that's pretty much why I make the videos, is so that I have a library of things that I can look at to kind of refresh my memory, right? And I'm not sure, I don't think I did a video on the power tokens quite yet. But yeah, like I don't really have too much questions, but like I think the main thing that you have here is you're just trying to separate, like instead of making many features for this token, like, oh, it allows you to vote, it allows you to gather fees, and it allows you to boost your positions. Instead of having one token have these features, you can delegate those features to other wallets, right? Or other people or something like this, right? So like I can retain my voting power, but give my boost to my brother, or maybe even sell my boost to, like, rent my boost to some anon, right? So this kind of feature, like, you see it coming up a little bit in DeFi, but it's not standardized, right? Like it's not it's not an ERC standard, right? So is that what kind of you're going for, is to try to kind of make a new standard of this governance
Ex-
token?
Exactly. It's a new primitive, and actually this comes after like I guess like 1 year of building. Yes. So initially when we were building it, we were just building it for ourselves. We were like, okay, this is what we want to use for basically for IPOR. So we were building this for our own protocol. But then as we continue going forward, and a lot of the problems started coming out were like mostly, many protocols just trying to copy Curve and run their protocols using like Curve, the Curve architecture, and then also the Curve token model. And then they realized, well, that might work for Curve, but it's definitely not going to work for you because you're not Curve. So then more and more people started to like get desperate because there was almost no innovation on that front. Yes, we did see like quite a lot of like economical innovation and like mostly like Ponzinomics being created, but we did not see actually like architecture, like because Curve, like with the locking, with the 2.5x multiplier, with the gauge system for voting, like the power dynamics that it creates, it was a massive innovation in the space when it came out. And arguably, like since it have come out, we have not seen another protocol on that level. like to create such a massive innovation in DeFi token economics. Yes. So yeah, then we realized, okay, actually there is a massive need for that. And I get like on the day that we published it, actually on the day that we made those contracts public, we probably got approached like by 15 protocols wanting to basically consult how can they use the code for their own protocols. I was doing like podcasts left and right to explain like the power token design. But okay, so this is on the technical side. Then on the economic side, like if we're thinking like the economic design, the actual token economics, yes, power tokens basically optimize for wider distribution because like IPOR itself is a public good. Yeah? The index is a public good, and when you claim to be like a public good and something that is fundamental for DeFi, you want to make sure that this thing is decentralized. Yes. So the first objective of the power token dynamics is like, okay, how can we create a token economy which is going to actually, somehow make it harder for, let's say, agents that might not have the best interest of the protocol to basically capture it, yes, or to monopolize it.
Yeah, like a
So this
hostile
is
takeover, right? Like a whale taking in all the governance tokens.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this was the first objective, and then the second objective was something that we see in DeFi quite a lot. Yes, where you basically have like a protocol starts, and then you have like all of those like mercenary farmers that will just go there. They're going to put a lot of money inside, and then they're just going to farm it, dump it, and then leave. And okay, just thinking like what are the objectives of those mercenary farmers? Like, why are they putting the money inside the protocol? Yes, it's because they have read the documentation, they have read the audits, they have seen that okay, the risk is very, very acceptable, so I'm basically going to put my money there. I'm going to earn like the fees and everything else that the protocol is giving me, and then on top of that I'm going to earn that governance token that I'm just going to look at it like pure yield. Yes, it's just the bonus that my money, which is supposedly quite safe as well, is also earning on top. But I'm not going to have like any alignment with that protocol. I'm just going to farm it. So this is something that we aim to prevent with the power token dynamics, and this is something that can already be observed. Yes. So for example, you have now LPs on IPOR that basically have provided like $200,000 and they are earning like 40% APR. And at the same time, you have people that have provided, let's say, $50,000 or $100,000 and they're earning 350% APR. And this is part of the why, because they have staked like power IPOR, they have like a better multiplier. So this generally like is I guess it's going to be a little bit different to explain it, like unless you go into the documentation, because there is quite a lot of math involved in terms of like how that logarithmic curve is being constructed, how the multipliers are being created. But the end goal is like, do not allow adversarial actors to try to monopolize basically the future issuance of that token. And this should be very, very useful, especially for DeFi protocols which really launch like very DeFi native, meaning that you launch on day one, there is like 0 tokens outside. Yes, there isn't like pre-mine or somebody having like millions of tokens. There is nothing. You launch like fair mining, and then people start to get that issuance, yes, from that liquidity mining program. And this is extremely difficult if you want to do it, and you want to do it with, let's say, the curve tokenomics. It's going to be almost impossible for you to prevent to actually be captured and farmed to death by people. Oops, sorry. My cat. But yeah, where was I? Yeah. So actually a lot of work went there, yes, in terms of like, okay, how can we ensure that this is not going to happen? And really to show other protocols that things can be done better, yes. And there can be a lot more innovation, especially on like token distribution.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like a lot of projects, like you said, like they're not curve. They adopted the VE model, hoping that it would have the effect of curve, but they don't have billions of dollars of TVL and $500 million of trading volume in some days, right? So it's tough for them to, and then also all of those people who are already like VE curve whale holders. So one of the things that, like, one of the criticisms of the VE system that I've seen is that it creates this need for like third party protocols to pop up and to give people optionality of exiting, as well as like just kind of like mostly liquidity, as well as kind of the ability to delegate be lazy in a sense, like not have to perform governance and allow experts to do it, like to assess the governance proposals and stuff like that. So basically what IPOR is trying, what these power tokens try to do is they kind of get rid of that need for that third party like VE managing protocol, right? Because then
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So for better or worse, I mean, yes, like Curve had that problem, which yeah, obviously it was a problem, and that's why there were so many protocols that basically came out to try to solve that problem, which is not bad because now we just have more protocols. Like I always support like innovation, and like seeing more protocols solving problems is amazing. Yeah, but power tokens almost completely eliminates that need. Yes, it does solve that problem by design, and I guess the other thing is that I really am not a fan of. I mean, but that's my personal opinion in general. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of like demanding like very long term backups for tokens, because for me this simply means like, okay, why are you doing that? Well, you kind of want to prevent people from like prevent the token from being able to float freely. Yes, so you are kind of like preventing price discovery because you are just force locking those tokens into the future, hoping that by the time that future comes, something is going to happen that will help for that token not to dump. But that's a pretty big risk, and that's also like a massive turnoff for majority of people to really participate. Yes, so right now Convex and like those other protocols, they're kind of solving that because they're giving you like that liquidity. But imagine before Convex, if you are like a retail provider, yes, on like an LP on Curve, and your tokens are locked there for like, you need to lock like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in that Curve token for like 2 years or 3 years or 4 years in order to get like a meaningful multiplier. Yes, it's like if you discount the value of those tokens for like 3 years in DeFi, yes, you should literally put that to zero, because majority of the protocols cannot even survive 3 years in DeFi.
Yeah, totally.
And
I'm
sorry.
sorry. So what I've seen come out of this problem, like the innovation that I've seen come out, the only thing that I've really seen is there's two possibilities. Is one is they create a liquid staking token like CVX CRV, anything like that, or the Yearn Y CRV token. So they give you this option. Sorry, excuse me. Or the Solidity model, where when you lock, you get an NFT, and that NFT is then tradable on the third-party market, right? In some sort of like OpenSea or something like that. So both of these models do have an issue. And first of all, like the NFT model has a problem of you need to find an individual who wants to buy your NFT off you. Like you don't have to, DM them, but there has to be an actual individual who wants to take that off you. It's not a pool system where there's a liquidity pool. So that's because it's an NFT and not an ERC20, right? And then the issue with the liquid staking, like the CVX CRV, is that you need to maintain peg, which never is very, very difficult, right? Because it just is, right? So I would see that.
And expensive. Yes.
Yeah. So and then you have to incentivize that liquidity pool to maintain that's going to maintain the peg. So I would see that based on my understanding of the power tokens is it eliminates those two problems as well. All right. Because it's an ERC20.
Because they do not need to be locked for time. Yes. Like power token is not like V curve. You like when you convert IPOR to power IPOR, for example, yes, you just convert it and then you can redeem it at any time that you want. The only thing which is like there is like a 14-day cool off period. So this is very similar, for example, to stake Aave. Yes, so like when you want to redeem stake Aave for Aave ERC20, you have like a 14 days cool off period before you get like the Aave token. And here we designed it in a way that we created our entire liquidity mining program based on power token. So also like people, LPs, when they are not earning IPOR, they're earning power. So the moment that they earn it and they claim it, they basically decide, do I want to use that power IPOR to basically get more boost? Do I want to delegate it to another module? Do I want to delegate it to somebody for governance? Or do I want to basically redeem it into IPOR and sell it on the market? And I mean, in general, 14 days is a pretty short time for a cool off, but at the same time, it does allow the protocol, that the inflation that comes does not come instantly the moment that it's mined. Yes, even though as time goes by, that thing kind of like equalizes because people just start having like rolling cooldowns. So this is not even going to be that much of a difference there. But the whole idea still is like promote like a very healthy token float. Do not try to artificially lock tokens out of circulation, like forcefully. Yes, allow people to be able to value the token based on its dollar utility value. Yes, so when people are deciding whether they should buy that IPOR token for X amount of stables, they're going to make that decision based on, okay, how much utility is me purchasing that one token going to give me? Yes, whether that utility is for boost, whether that utility is for governance, whether that utility is for dividends. This is the main thing. Yes, do not try to suffocate the market by really making the float extremely low.
There's a protocol out on Arbitrum that reminds me of this a little bit, and that is Camelot. I'm not sure if you're aware of them, and I'm wondering, did they adopt the power tokens, or did they just kind of in parallel create a very similar system? Because they also, it sounds, a lot of the things you just said are echoed over there as well.
Yeah, interesting. I'm actually familiar with Camelot. I'm also wondering about it. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe they just came to the same conclusion. It is obviously possible because I mean we are all people thinking in DeFi, thinking from first principles. So it is quite possible that they came to the same conclusion. But in terms of like the distribution there, sorry, in terms of like how I can't really remember exactly how they were. No, they had the modules basically, but then the farming was, they just issue a set amount of tokens. They don't have like escrowed Grail, yes. No. They just do the modules.
Yeah, well, they do have like X-Rail, right? Like it is like 14-day locked, and they give it out. They give out
Oh,
X-Rail.
okay. No. Okay. So there was okay. So their concept was like this: when you stake your Grail, you basically can decide whether you want to stake it for 14 days or for 6 months. And then when you are unstaking it, you are basically going to pay a fee depending on, like, when you are unstaking it, if you are unstaking it for 14 days, you're going to basically pay 50% fee. If you are unstaking it, if you are allowing it to vest over 6 months, you are going to be paying no fee. So they kind of got that from GMX, I think. So they just iterated a little bit on the GMX concept, because that's not really similar to IPOR. Yes, in the IPOR case, you do not need to choose for how long you're going to stake your tokens, and you do not need to choose for how long you want to vest them. Yes, it's always the same. Like you if you want to redeem the power IPOR to IPOR, it's just 14 days cool off. But I do like Camelot's design. Yes, I think that it's very suitable for DEX. So yeah.
So with the power token, then, what is the if it's only 14 days, and like if I convert my IPOR into power IPOR, then I have a transferable token that is grants me those features that the token grants, whether it's governance boost or dividends, right? So
Well,
why?
it's not transferable. Power IPOR is not transferable.
Okay. So then why not just have it like stake it somewhere? Like why does it need to mint a new token? Why not just take IPOR, stake it in the appropriate
It's
gauge, staking contract,
it's
and then grant me those benefits?
Well, it's more efficient. First of all, you cannot stake the same ERC20 token to like 4 different modules. Yes. So if you want to have like different logic that supports like the different modules, let's say one for governance, one for dividends, one for boost, you cannot use the same ERC20 token because you cannot put that token into 3 different contracts at the same time. So this is done via delegating function. So that does not require the token to move anywhere. By delegating, you just basically inside the token contract itself, you assign a value to a specific module, from where that module is just going to, like, the module is just reading from the token contract rather than requiring an ERC20 transfer. So it's just, it's more efficient. It's much more efficient. And then on top of that, it really allows you for much greater functionality.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I see what it is. So the token's holding basically like each individual's well, the entire token contract would hold an array of everyone's delegations, or is it each individual position holds its own individual perimeters?
Yeah, the token contract basically holds all of the different delegations. Yeah, so all of that is inside the power token contract, as well as like the ability to add or remove modules or to change the logic of specific module.
Can additional modules be like added? Like let's say I
Yep.
have some other use case. I want to grant people another emissions token if they do this action. Whatever it is.
Absolutely. So that's the whole point. That was the whole point, like to have that flexibility. So, for example, let's say that tomorrow we decide, okay, we want to make it that when people delegate their power IPOR to their own to a governance module, that they're going to be also accruing 10% voting power more extra every single year. and you create that module, you create that logic, and you put it in the Power token. So yeah, you can create modules for everything.
Yeah, I'm trying to visualize the actual like the logic coding of it. Like like I get to that, like you can create any module, right? But how does that module know? Because the power token is immutable, right? Like it should be, right? So, or it's not an upgradable token.
It's an upgradable contract.
So if I create a module that has some specifications, is there a limit on how many modules I can connect to the power token? Maybe that's that kind of.
Well, that's more a question for the devs. I mean, I guess it would be in terms of like, you know, the contract becoming like way too big because it needs to save way too much data. But that's more of a question for our devs.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Yeah, it's getting a little bit late. I'm gonna have to run soon. Do you guys have anything else you want to like kind of discuss? Like a quick little thing, either whether it be the interest rates or back or on power token, whichever.
I think we covered pretty most of the things, right?
Yeah, I have a pretty good understanding of both from this conversation, and yeah, I
Well,
think it's both.
maybe just a little quick like kind of hint to the future, right? So we talked about like what would a fixed rate product look like? You do multiple contract calls. You do the Aave borrow plus the IPOR swap, right? Or you can get as complicated as let's say you post the ETH as collateral. You take an option on the ETH to protect your price risk. You borrow against it, and then you lend against that. You can create this entire like yielding vault out of that, right? But the big thing is like you can create larger structured products, and this is looking at IPOR as this base construct to build more complex debt products. And so this is really where we're going. So if you look at a 28-day swap, it's not very useful yet, but as we start to extend those maturities, you can build a lot more on top of that. And that means a lot of other protocols, a lot of other protocol builders, a lot of other, like financial minds can string these together to create something more complex. And that's really where we're going. And on the index side, what's important is will be in the future the number, essentially the quantity, quality and velocity of the external smart contracts that are actually referencing this on-chain index to price their own derivatives. And so that's why derivatives or deals or debt instruments. And so that's why Demeter mentioned that it's a public good. So instead of being published by Bloomberg, it's actually printed to Ethereum or printed to any other chain, and then an external protocol builder can set their own debt instruments based on the IPOR rates. So I think that's maybe the kind of a view into the future and the utility and kind of the anchor of this protocol. And maybe that's the last thing I'd like to leave you with.
What you just said kind of gave me an idea and something I'll just throw out there. And you guys, you do your work on it and decide to think about it. Like as a fixed, everyone likes the idea of like fixed rate interest, right?
Yeah.
Because it's predictable and they know what it will be in the future. However, what would be more applicable or more convenient for the people is a variable interest rate that is contrary to what I'm actually getting. So, if I wanted to hedge the borrowing rate, then what I would want my hedge to do is to adjust to the conditions of my borrowing rate. So then I would be maintaining a good hedge. I wouldn't have to manually go back in and change, like reassess the hedge, whether it's covering or not. It would do that by itself. So I think that would be probably the best use case or the best, like the ideal setup of this use case, this hedging use case.
Yeah, and maybe we can see
That
actually debt markets being based on the IPOR itself, and then it has this.
yeah,
So it has its own hedge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So then, yeah, then it doesn't. It's going to hedge basically. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. What I wanted to say is that this sounds a little bit more like an insurance for your variable rate rather than a hedge. And I guess like the point here is that like a lot of those problems are really because of the immaturity of the credit markets in DeFi. But as more protocols are coming out, as we have like more credit markets and also more fixed rate protocols, this is naturally going to converge to one. Yeah, the same that you see like a massive efficiency on the spot markets. Yes, you don't really see, for example, Uniswap and Sushi giving you like different rates on Ethereum. Yes, because all of that is being arbed. It's very efficiently arbed on the spot markets. For right now, we don't really have that for the credit markets, but this is where we are going in DeFi. Yes.
This IPOR rate, is it a is there any trust in it? Like, are you guys calculating this on the back end and then deploying it out like in a centralized system, or is it all completely 100% mathematically done on chain?
Yeah, there's a facade contract that's calculating it directly from chain. The question is like when it goes cross chain, how efficient are these cross chain messaging systems? For example, like let's say you want to print the IPOR to Arbitrum, right? So it really depends on the complexity there. So there's a backend component and an on-chain component. The on-chain component can be called to update the index. It can also be used, for example, as a future auditor in case, let's say there's the IPOR is being sourced from and printed to, multiple chains that are not compatible with one another. So it's kind of engineering trade-offs, but the current construction, is being calculated on chain. But as you add more protocols, that logic scales linearly, and so does the cost. So it's always kind of these trade-offs.
Like in order for it to actually change the rate, it needs to have you need to pay gas, right? Like so, a
Yeah.
keeper something has to actually instigate a transaction or poke it. So, what kind of poking do you guys have to keep this on chain?
So people that are taking okay, there's two parts, right? So one is what frequency, is the IPOR just being published every block to burn money and subsidize ETH miners? No, right? But you want kind of you want more granular you want more granular rates, the more complex the instruments that you're running on it, right? So you have this trade-off. So right now there's a function called the heartbeat function, which is based on a time and volatility function. So, if there's a short time but large volatility, it gets printed. If there's, the longer time that passes, a little volatility will trigger a printing. That printing is paid for by the protocol itself, and that's currently subsidized by taking the IPOR interest rate derivatives, right? So swap takers are paying an Oracle subsidization fee, and that is being accrued by the protocol. That will be used to convert stablecoins into ETH, and ETH goes to cover the printing. That in the future will be opened up so that any protocol that wants to trigger a printing can just send ETH to trigger a publication. And so, if you imagine that there's multiple protocols that rely on the IPOR, they're going to want to get more granular data. They're going to be subsidizing this printing more and more. And by the time that you have this giant, credit ecosystem built around the IPOR rate, maybe you actually get different parties that are subsidizing block over block printing.
Yeah, this is clever. I really like the metaphor of a heartbeat. Like volatility goes up, adrenaline goes up, and the heart.
Yeah, this is all credit to the team. We have some amazing minds working on this, very super senior enterprise software developers, mathematicians, quants, front end, product design, community, kind of every asset, right? So this is all, part of the internal resources that are on the IPOR Labs team. That if you have a protocol this complex, it's impossible to just hack together. So we have a lot of really, really smart people that are always thinking, from a security perspective, thinking adversely, thinking creatively on how to construct the protocol. So all credit for these things goes to the IPO Labs team is building.
Okay, yeah, I've learned a lot, guys. It's getting kind of late. It's like an hour and a half or so. I
Ended up
appreciate.
going a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff though. Like I like the ideas that you guys have here. I especially like, the public service idea of this, like a public good. Like we need more of that kind of stuff. And because I'm a strong believer in, like a rising tide raises all ships, right? And protocols or teams that build things that are good for more than just themselves are helping everybody in this space, right? So, like, this is why I do what I do. It's for the same reason, right? Like, I don't invest in every project that I cover, but I cover it without question because I believe that we all should give a little bit. It's like charity, like donation of your time. Like, if you can give a little bit back. Now, you guys are doing a little bit more than a little bit of time, right? That's a lot of time, right? It's a huge endeavor and so forth. But I really like this idea of building something that everyone can use. You don't have to pay it permissionless. Of course there would be it's not going to be free in the sense of like you said, like maybe I want to subsidize. I want the heartbeat to beat faster. Then that's going to cost me money, right? But not that it's for me to plug in. I can plug in, start to learn how to use it, and then decide if I want to incentivize it or make it more healthy or this kind of stuff, right? You understand, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to pay 20K a year for a Bloomberg terminal subscription. You can just go to Etherscan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, I appreciate it, guys. I thank you. I'm going to reach out to you guys in DMs in the future, or we'll talk a little bit more. Feel free to message me anytime as well. I'm not sure who. I think it was the intern, IPOR intern, who reached out to me and invited me to the space, and I thank you for that. I learned a lot, and I appreciate your time, guys.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining.
Okay.
It was very,
Of course.
very educational. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining, and I think it was a great session. And thank you everyone who joined and stayed until the end. This will be available as a recording on YouTube, and I'll add timestamps so it's for easy browsing. So yeah, good evening. Well, have a great evening, and till next time.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Cheers.